Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Just a Recording Podcast. I am your host, Patrick Moen. This week's guest is one that really turns everything upside down on my belief system and just religion, and his wealth of knowledge just really goes super deep of being able to just explain intricacies of Bible verses and what church really means, and really explaining in a way of how his breakout from church at an early age, being raised in such a dominant religious upbringing, to kind of breaking free and then re-entering that realm. We talk a little bit about business. We talk a little bit about coaching. This individual is a Dale Carnegie coach and really helps individuals with breakthroughs and finding their inner greatness, and is just a huge believer of, everyone has innate greatness within inside them, and just really pushes to make everyone that he comes in contact with better. And I think that you're going to walk away from this episode looking at yourself a little bit differently, maybe walking a little bit taller, because amongst this person's presence, you just feel incredible. So without further ado, I want to introduce my guest this week, Mr. Doug Stewart. Go ahead and strap in, because this is going to be a really good episode. Before we get into it, what I want you to do is I just launched my new website, and I'd love for you to go check it out. I am doing business coaching, and so my new website is maverickbusinesselevation.com. You can find it on my social handle. You can find it on the web. Go ahead and give it a check out. Let me know if there's anybody that you can refer, somebody that you think of that might need my services. And let's go ahead and get into it. Appreciate you, fam. Peace. All right, we are live. I don't know why I always say that we are live. I'd just like to start off with like an inflection point of like, we are beginning.
We are recording.
We are recording. It's just a recording. So I have a super special guest today. This gentleman, like a lot of my recent guests, has really just made a gigantic impact, personally and professionally. This guy is a friend that I met through the Raleigh Renaissance, and then after that has just become a sounding board for any and all things. He's introduced me to his family. He's taken me out on his boat. We've done all the things. We bounce ideas off one another. And I can't really say enough amazing things about this gentleman. He's definitely opened up my eyes a little bit on this journey that I've been on to rediscover who God is and what God means to me. He does have a religious background, and his story is very interesting. And so we're going to go in and out of just some areas that is kind of in his wheelhouse, and hopefully touch on some areas that are outside of his wheelhouse. But I feel like what he's doing now is so instrumental. So he works with the Dale Carnegie training program and is a Dale Carnegie trainer, and he instructs and works with a lot of companies to really just indoctrinate that idea of Dale Carnegie. There's several different sessions. Businesses hire him and help them with areas of opportunity and kind of like raising up the employees of those businesses. And he's really just made a name for himself in the Triangle and in North Carolina. He is a former TEDx speaker, which has gotten lots of views, which is incredible. And, I also don't want to forget he's a father and a husband, first and foremost. And you know that family comes first to this gentleman. So I want to introduce Mr. Doug Stewart.
What's up, man?
What's up?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is like a long time coming. We've been talking about this for a hot minute.
Yeah, I remember the first time we met, you mentioned that you had a podcast that was kind of percolating in your mind.
Yeah, I've definitely. I think you were like the the fire that lit under my ass to kind of get it out and like to just do the things. I mean, I was just seeing you put out your podcast content, and it was just like you were doing it so quick and so easy. And your podcast is I Am Not Your Pastor.
I Am Not Your Pastor.
I Am Not Your Pastor.
Yeah.
So no longer.
Nah.
Canceled.
Yeah. Your podcast launched, so I just gave up. I just quit. There was no need to go on.
That's bullshit.
No, it's well, whether it's true or not, the truth is right now I have no podcasts.
No podcasts.
None of them. So I had three. I had three that were on air, but all three of them are gone right now.
Okay.
I'm in the middle of a massive like realignment
of life or just profession,
business, just the whole thing. It's a complete like reset.
All right.
That started about a month ago. So I am now listening more and talking less.
Okay.
And your podcast is on the air, so why even contribute anymore?
Well, good. It's been a minute since we've caught up, so I'm excited to unpack a lot of this new the art of stillness that it sounds like you're incorporating into your daily life. I know that November and the beginning of December has been an insanely busy time for you.
Yes.
Your 2020 is going to be bananas.
Yes.
And so I think let's start out because I think your story is really interesting. I think your sports background, the family business, where you grew up, super religious. Mm-hmm. Let's touch a little bit about that. So where is it that you grew up?
I grew up in Sanford, North Carolina, about an hour south of Raleigh.
Got it.
Yeah.
And born and raised there.
Born and raised.
Family's still there.
Yep, family's still there. I most of my family on my dad's side lived on the same side on the same street as a kid, and my mom's family lived in Raleigh, so I didn't travel a lot. Very small town, very rural. Started kindergarten at a Christian school in Sanford and graduated from that same place.
Right.
So only one school, so limited life experience.
Yeah.
And I've had my time as an adult where I was really irritated by that reality, but I've grown.
Like a sheltered upbringing?
Yeah, like not having, one of the things in my business that I've noticed is that the people who seem to have the most empathy are typically the most well-traveled. And the people that struggle the most with empathy sometimes are the people who don't have exposure to different worldviews, different types of people.
They stay in their comfort zone.
Yeah, and they just stay with what they know. So they don't know what they don't know, and it's not necessarily a bad. I mean, I think you can make a delineation when it becomes a bad thing, right? But living in a small town isn't a bad thing. But thinking that way is the only way and the absolute truth can be really devastating.
I agree.
And so I feel really fortunate because all of the, I like to say that the way that I make my money now is by talking about my trauma and talking about all the, stuff that happened as a kid. But it's really, I have found that my lack of travel and exposure, I didn't get a lot of empathy from that. Where I got my empathy was from life punching me in the mouth and having my own pain and being marginalized in my own way and lifted up in other ways that I probably didn't deserve.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think, because I know you talk a lot about this when you speak, that basketball, which was your sport of choice, I mean, you're 6'6", right?
Yeah,
you're
6'6", 6'7". Somewhere. I think I'm going down.
Yeah. So you're a ball player.
Yeah.
Do you think that helped indoctrinate like this idea that there's other people outside of just Sanford?
For sure. I mean, I grew up I went to an all-white church. I went to an all-white school, and everyone believed the same thing that I believed. And, we all thought very similar. And when I was 13, I got recruited to be on my first like really competitive AAU basketball team, and it was in Greensboro.
Right.
So I went from being in a school that had one black kid to being the only white kid on the bus.
Right.
And I saw the difference between those two cultures. and really grew to love my basketball team. And I realized that there was some things that were different about my AAU team, and there was some loyalties that were different about my guys on my team. Like if something went sideways with my friends from my small town school, it's kind of every man for themselves.
Right.
But I felt the safest in some of the most dangerous places that I found myself with on my AAU team.
Right.
Because I knew that I had guys that would go down with me.
Right.
And that exposure taught me something that I think few kids at that age with that experience have the privilege to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned church a little bit. So what kind of church did you go to?
So we were a little bit nomadic in terms of church early in my life. We went to Methodist church, Presbyterian church, Baptist church, a Southern Baptist church, all sorts of different churches. And part of it was because I kept getting kicked out of preschools. so we just like hopped from one to the other.
Yeah.
But early in my life, my dad didn't really attend church with us. It was kind of my mom took me to church because it was important
really?
to her.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that my dad wasn't religious. He just was, I think otherwise just disinterested in just the Sunday morning, put on a tie, go sit in a pew and listen to a dude talk.
Right.
And so mom would take us to church, and they would get enough of me after a time, and then we go to a different church. But then after a while, I started, when I started kindergarten, we went to church at the same place I went to school. So it was a Christian school, and they had kindergarten through 12th grade, and so that was a Southern, a relatively fundamental evangelical Southern Baptist church.
Yeah.
And that's where I spent most of my indoctrination happened in that church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy church? Or
Sometimes.
did you do it just because mom said to do it?
Sometimes I enjoyed it. I was always interested in spiritual things.
Right.
I always, even from a young age, I always wanted to be a pastor. I thought it was really cool. And some of it I think was ego driven. Like it's cool that I get the mic and I get to talk and everyone else has to sit and listen.
Yeah.
I liked to talk as a kid. I didn't like to listen as a kid. So it makes sense to be a pastor, right?
Yeah.
And in a small town, the pastors are kind of the rock stars of small towns. They're the best speakers. They have the most influence. They a lot of times have the most affluence.
Yeah.
And so the pastor is like the equivalent of having a political position.
Right.
Or
when they talk, people shut up and listen.
Yeah, being a celebrity of some kind. So to me, that was super cool.
Right.
I never enjoyed the process of church because I wasn't very good at sitting still because of my quote disabilities and all of the other stuff, right? And so I was always the kid that would really irritate and piss off the Sunday school teacher because I would ask questions that they couldn't answer on purpose, to find like flaws in their way of thinking, right? Like I'd ask questions about like, so what type of whale would have swallowed Jonah so that Jonah could like stay alive for 3 days? You know what I mean? And I would ask for like, okay, so what type of whale? And those sorts of questions when you're like 7, 8 years old,
Probably shouldn't be asking. Or...
Yeah, and I mean, I'm telling people like Santa Claus isn't real in Sunday school, and you know what I mean, stuff like that. So I was a bit of a disruptor early.
Yeah.
And I guess not a lot has really changed.
No, nothing has changed except the fact that you're now not talking and like listening.
Yeah.
So it's funny that it's a little bit of the opposite now.
Trying to mature a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, we all got to.
Yeah.
So, when did you feel the breakout of church kind of really happen for you?
Breakout how? Like
where you kind of looked at it like you didn't need to attend it or go to it? Because I think there was a point where you stopped attending and you were like, I don't know if this kind of church is for I'm a spiritual person, but I don't know if this is for me.
Yeah, so when I was a junior in high school, I remember having this like epiphany that what they were teaching us wasn't what we were actually doing, right? Like there was this idea of like you commit your life to Jesus and you say this prayer and then you're quote saved, and if you're saved then you're a new person in Christ and you don't sin anymore, and like And so that's like what they were teaching us, but like everyone was still sinning. Like we weren't living the way that we were like saying that we were living in church. And that bothered me even as a junior in high school.
Wow.
And I can remember going to one of the local pastors and being like, hey man, I think I've gotten this wrong. Like I want to be like, for me, it was escaping eternal conscious damnation, right? I just didn't want to go to hell, right? So
Right.
like, give me the formula so I can do it right, so that I'm sure that if I die, right? Because that's the question. Like they would pack us in vans and take us to the local mall, and we'd walk around and just walk up to strangers and go, "Do you know where you would go if you died today?" You know, and like that was the common like
Jeez.
narrative that we had. So like,
How old were you when you were doing that?
I mean, middle school.
To
But
ask
that was
those questions.
But
though,
that's
at
how
that
they
age.
taught us evangelism, right? That's how they told us go and make disciples, and so that's how that interpretation happened.
Right.
And so I remember that being a real problem for me. So I like dug in and like did my research and was like, okay, here's the formula for how to get saved. And so that's what the formula I followed. So I go, got it, saved, done. So then I went to my principal in my school, and I was a junior in high school, and I said, hey, look, I thought I was saved. I wasn't saved. Now I'm saved. I'd like to share my experience with the school. And so the next Tuesday for chapel service, they gave me a mic, which they probably should have never, ever done. And I stood up, and this is my first speaking engagement of my life. And I said, hey, this is like 300 kids at our school. And I said, hey, I thought I was saved. I wasn't saved. Here's what I found when I actually did my research. Here's how you can become saved. And it was very legalistic, just madness, right? And of my school, like 40 people that day came up and got re-saved or like saved or whatever. And like all these are like Christian school kids that have been in church their whole life, and they're crying and bawling their eyes out, and they're getting saved or recommitting, all because they don't want to go to hell.
Right.
And so that sort of caught fire. So then some other Christian schools are like, hey, can Doug come talk to our thing? And I was a bit of like, especially in our conference, people knew who I was because of basketball, right? At that time, I was ranked like number 4 in the state by Prep Stars. And, you know, nobody was really anyone athletically in my conference. Like I was a big fish in a small pond.
Yeah.
And so I would go around, like I missed school a lot of days because I was just going to other schools speaking at their chapel service.
What were some of the things you talked about?
It was primarily about doing what you said you believed.
Yeah.
And so
was it you using your own personal examples of how, like...
Nah, man, I didn't have any examples.
Yeah.
I hadn't lived long enough to
Yeah.
really have any, like, you know what I mean? Like, and then the stuff that was really at stake. I mean, you think about the things that seniors in high school really struggle with. Like, you can't stand up in a Christian school and talk about struggling with like sex,
Right.
and like, you know, like drinking, like the things that get you kicked out of school. You can't talk about it's, you know, at that kind of school,
Right.
And so it was all just like kind of surface stuff, and
Yeah.
and then I ended up graduating from high school by the skin of my teeth, going to Liberty University on a full scholarship to play basketball. And man, I got up there and looked around and just thought, like, you know, the last 2 years of my life, that was stupid. Like, I don't feel I feel more guilty about myself than I did, you know, before I got resaved or saved or whatever that was.
Right.
And it was so transactional. I realized, like, if that was a parent, if the visualization we're given of God is like a father,
Right.
and my father said to me, hey, love me or else, that's not love, man.
Right.
Like, that's just not what it is. And so I just threw it all away. I was like, this is stupid. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And so I just and so I overcorrected and went the other way. Like, folded arms, like, man, this is dumb. I'm not doing
Stop
this.
going to church.
Stop going to church. Stop caring.
Did you stop believing though?
I stopped believing in that God. Yeah.
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 So what did you believe in? Because that the pendulum swung the complete
say,
opposite
I would say
way.
I got really close to agnostic.
Okay.
Like, because I always had a hard time believing, like, this is all just like by chance. Like,
Right.
There's no greater power. There's no like, but I did entertain the idea of, like, oh, all those other religions that I was taught were bad, and all those other people that are going to hell, like, maybe there's something to some of their stuff.
Right.
You know, and I started reading a bit more about like Buddhism, understanding some other faith traditions.
Sure.
And I was really surprised that at Liberty how diverse belief systems are. I mean, they all fall under the Christian
Right.
sort of umbrella.
Yeah, because Liberty's a Christian school, right?
Yeah. But even so, there were so many different ways of thinking about and talking about God and who God was and what God was up to and how God related to us and how we could relate to God, that it really opened my eyes and at least made me willing to entertain the idea that maybe this small little church in a small little town didn't like corner the market on truth. And
Right.
maybe there was something else out there, you know,
something bigger.
yeah. And so that really drove me to, and I mean, realistically, I did what most kids do in college is I just kind of like explored and didn't take anything too serious. And then I got married and figured out at the end of college, I got married and decided like, I need to kind of get my act together. You know, I married a girl that has an incredibly strong faith, and I remember her.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
super strong, and that
super
was
strong.
her family that brought her up. That was
She was raised in that and really had very much her own like relationship with God in a way that I really didn't, and at that point didn't care to.
Right.
And so I really ended up finding myself in like the pathology of my parents, where like mom goes to church, dad doesn't really care. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't against it. I just wasn't trying to do the whole song and dance thing. And then we had our preferences. She grew up really like charismatic. I grew up very fundamental Baptist, which is the church services are very different between the two groups. My way is very like buttoned up. You dress up, you sit, you listen, everyone's quiet. There's no real like amens, there's no guitars, there's no drums, like, but she grew up like full drums, like dance in the pew, like get down with the get down at church sort of thing.
That's fun.
Yeah. And so that made me really uncomfortable.
Right.
But my way made her really uncomfortable. So it was hard for us to find a church. And I can remember her saying like, hey, at some point you got to step up and be the spiritual leader of this family, because that's not my job.
Wow.
And it took me a long time, man. It took me really until about 2010 before I accepted sort of that responsibility in my family.
You guys were married for a couple of years.
We got married in 2007.
Yeah. When you guys first started dating, was it a prerequisite that you had to be faith driven, that you had to have some sort of faith, or was she kind of open to the idea of, if you didn't believe in God or if you didn't go to church, she'd still date you? It wasn't like a.
I wouldn't say it was a prerequisite. I do think it was an expectation for sure.
Right.
But at that time, I would have said that I'm Christian.
Yeah.
Just not interested in like doing the whole song and dance and like the things that had been hurtful or I had seen as damaging to me or other people. I wasn't interested in.
Yeah.
But I will say it was a prerequisite for us that we both had a tremendous intention to raise our children in alignment and to teach them in a non-contradictory way, right? At least in those core, the most important things. We wanted to create some containers for them that they could do something with.
Yeah. Was this at a time when you were still going to one church and obviously she was going to another, and you guys were trying to figure out how the children were going to be brought up, or did that create any tension?
So we tried really hard to find a church we could both stomach.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we would go to a church I loved and she would hate it, and then we go to a church she loved and I'd hate it. And then after
how are those car rides home after that?
Stupid, because it ends up being all about preference and not about like truth and like edification. It's like, did you like it? Well, no, I thought it was stupid. Did you like it? I loved it. Right. And so there was never any like in between. So to find something that was a compromise for both of us, it meant both of us had to hate it.
Yeah.
Right. And so we like searched, couldn't come to any common ground. So at some point we just were like, man, this is dumb. We're not doing this anymore. We just argue.
Right.
You know,
one of us, the whole opposite of what you're supposed to.
And then when you're church shopping, bro, you run into some silly stuff Like there are some sort of wacky people out there that'll try to grab people that show up at their church at the first time, and it just is some strange interaction with some strange cats.
Yeah. It's very culty, right? Yeah, they try to get you to drink the Kool-Aid right away.
Yeah. And so we didn't go to church for a little. And it wasn't that long. It was maybe 3 to 6 months or something like that.
This is before any children were born,
kids,
right? Yeah.
And so I was just like, look, I tell you what, let's just go to the closest church that we have. Like, what's the closest church to us? Let's go to that church until we figure it out.
Yeah.
So we ended up at a church just down the road from us when we lived in Southeast Raleigh, and ended up staying there for like 7 years.
What church was that?
It was a church called Church Alive in Fuquay.
Okay.
Which we would still be attending if we didn't move across town.
Yeah.
And that church was really important to us. It was more Meredith's style of service, which was fine. At some point, I just kind of let go of my ego, and it was like, hey, let me just connect with the people, and not worry so much about how the music that they play or the color of their carpet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or the silly stuff that doesn't matter.
Right.
And we had a great experience there.
I mean, the information that's being given is kind of the same. I mean, it's been a very long time since I've gone to church, but the way it's delivered is the difference in most of the churches, but it's still the same beliefs, the same story for the most part.
And what I would say is it's the same story, different beliefs.
Right. Okay.
Right? Because the undercurrent of the beliefs and how they relate to the story, and it depends on how you see the characters as you read the Bible. If you see it's like this. A lot of times, I think the American church sees themselves as like Jerusalem and Judea, when in reality, the America has been Egypt and Rome, right? America has been empire more than it's been Israel, right? And many Western American churches, their faith and their country are synonymous, right?
Yeah.
And so when you have that, when they say, hey, we're Christians and we're American and it's the same, then you have an undercurrent of colonization and racism, and they don't preach about it, but that's what happens. Right. And so
it's like the unspoken.
It's the unspoken stuff. And like by good-hearted, well-intentioned people that just accepted a way of thinking about the world. And so it's an us versus them. And then it gets even worse when people go, hey, I'm American, I'm Christian, I'm blank political party, whichever way, right? So they muddy the water with these outside ideologies, and they leave, or at least marginalize, what the intention of the person or the God that they follow ever intended in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. So they make, and that's why I said I didn't lose faith in God. I just lost faith in that God.
Right.
I lost faith in the God that only catered to the white ideals, and the working class political views. Right. I left that God because that God wasn't big enough. That God only worked in small little bubbles. That God doesn't. And look, like another in the Bible, and also in today's vocabulary, we talk about the good news of the gospel. Well, if it's not good news to everyone, it's not good news.
Right.
It's only good news if it's good news to you. Right. So if I say it's the good news of the gospel and it's not good news for you, then there's a flaw in my gospel.
Right.
And I got to fix that. And so that's been a big part of sort of how I've thought about my belief system, and what has caused me to want to leave the church, and then to not leave the church, and want to leave Christianity, but then not leave Christianity.
Yeah. So let's unpack that a little bit, because we're kind of venturing in a territory that I'm not well versed in, but it's definitely a new thought process that I've kind of really taken a loving to. So when you say what you're just referencing about the truth of the gospel, but it might not resonate with me, then there's something wrong with what your gospel is saying. Let's unpack that a little bit. So what do you mean by that? So give me an example.
So an example would be, my lived experience. So when I was in high school, my last 2 years, junior and senior year, we had exchange students come live with us.
Yeah.
My junior year, it was a young man from Spain. The second year, we took a young man from France. So when he was to be picked up from the airport, you think, hey, we're getting a guy from France. Well, you have, where I'm from, you have this idea of what a 17-year-old boy from France looks like. You know, for me, you imagine like the pencil mustache and the thing, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and
Smoking a cigarette.
yeah, the little bitty tiny cigarettes.
Yeah.
And that's not who got off the airplane. The guy who got off the airplane was of African descent. He was wearing this massive like 4X Allen Iverson jersey, these super baggy Boss jeans, and like he was and he was super into. This is when Get Rich or Die Trying came out. You know what I mean? Like he was super into like 50 and hip hop, and it wasn't the type of person that my school. We didn't have kids like that at my school.
Sounds like you had a layover in New York
for a decade. You know what I mean? And it turns out that he had just been in school in France, but he was actually from Africa.
Okay.
Right. And he had spent a year in Senegal. Studying there as an exchange student, so grew up so he had some experience. He had some world experience, not just France, not just Senegal, but also in different worlds, like in a fully Muslim country, or at least region. And he landed, and he couldn't because he was not American. He was of African descent. He didn't look like us. He didn't like the things that we liked. He wasn't going to listen to Southern gospel music, right? And so he couldn't be our version of Christian.
Right.
Right? And so the good news wasn't good news to him because he had to become a white Southern male,
right,
as we defined it, for it to be good news for him. Otherwise, he just couldn't really participate.
Right.
Right. And so that was my first like, oh, so this is only good news if you're white, American, straight, and probably better if you're a man.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it could go sort of either way.
Right.
And I was taught that if you have not said what we were taught is the sinner's prayer, where you repent and accept Jesus into your heart, then you would go to hell if you died, if you hadn't done that.
Yeah.
Well, that's the vast majority of humanity who hasn't done that. I mean, what about all the people before Jesus? What about all the people who are way better people that just happen to have grown up in a Hindu country or a Muslim country, or grew up with Buddhist parents? What about the people that didn't grow up with white Christian evangelical parents? You know, they just go to, like, that goes back to the father analogy, like, so if God is like a father and throws most of his children into eternal conscious torment, I don't know that I can believe in that God. Right. And so that's what I mean by, if it's not good news for everybody, man, it's not freaking good news. Right. And that's hard for people, because that really rubs up against a lot of Christians' ways that they believe and the way they see the world. And if there's not this like God quid pro quo thing, then it kind of falls apart. They need the order that judgment brings.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That you like this idea of, and this is all super still new to me. I mean, I left church a long, long time ago, but these last couple months have really made me fall in love with who I think and who I know this thing to be of God. Yeah. And it's been really beautiful, but like you're growing up, I remember like fearing this person that's going to cast judgment on me. And you're just so scared of like eternal damnation. And burning in hell, and like, you got, there's two ways when you pass. There's the one that nobody wants, that's
Right.
really hot,
Yeah.
or the one where it's the pearly gates.
Yeah.
And there's still a vast majority of the human population that are living their life every day with this fear that this person is going to cast judgment.
Yeah. And and I would suggest that they're not living their life at all. They're waiting. They're
Yeah.
waiting for the next one, and they're just squandering this one
Right.
because of fear, because of the unknown. But the truth is, man, like nobody knows. Nobody knows
Yeah.
what really happens. You know what I mean? After you die, like nobody has any idea.
Right.
Like, we have our holy scripture that doesn't really talk that much about it.
Right.
Like, it's staggering how little the afterlife is actually talked about in the Bible.
Yeah.
If you took out everything and only left the stuff that talks about the afterlife, you would have nothing more than a pamphlet
Right.
from the Bible. Yet we have these systematic theologies that we think we have it all figured out, when most of our understanding or most of our visualization of what the afterlife and hell is didn't come from the Bible at all. It came from Dante.
Right. So let's explain that, because I'm new to me.
So Dante's Inferno
Okay.
is a writing about the reality of hell and what and brings great detail to what it is and who goes there and how they're tortured and what it looks like.
Right.
That just doesn't show up in the Bible.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a lot of art that informs our religious traditions. It's not just the Christians. There's other traditions that have that as well. But I think when you make your faith about whether you're going to get judged or not at the end, then you lose an opportunity for a relationship, right? If I live my marriage worried about whether my wife is going to be angry with me at the end of the day or not, I'm going to be like playing defense all the time.
Right.
And I'm just going to be trying not to screw up. And I don't know about you, but the times in my life where I've just like tried not to screw up, that's when I make my biggest mistakes.
Right.
Right. And then I beat myself up for it. And then I make bigger mistakes.
Yeah.
And then I have to medicate. Right. And then I make a bigger mistake. Right.
Yeah.
And so that way of showing up, I find, drives the most trauma. And, we've seen that with, the Catholic priests, and, they're called that they must be celibate. Well, we're sexual beings, and celibacy is a thing that I believe some people are called to. But when you go, everyone that does this must be celibate, well, you're going to have some sideways stuff that happens,
right?
And the Catholic Church has realized the real weight and reality of that, and
right.
It's ruined.
It's like a repercussion of what this idea kind of became.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And it's. I think that anytime you say something, it has to be for everyone this way, you leave most people out.
Right.
What you're really saying is, I want everyone to just be more like me.
Right.
Yeah. It's ego.
It's so ego.
Yeah.
All right. So we talked a lot about church. So let's talk about the current church that you're attending right now, and why you landed at that particular church.
One reason we landed there was by accident. We moved across town. It became hard for us to get to church. Our kids were young, and so we wanted them to be involved, and we just weren't being active. We were just showing up just for church, and we wanted to be a part of a community.
Right.
And so we moved across town, and we started doing the church shopping thing again, and didn't have nowhere that we really felt like we were connecting or felt drawn to. And my wife Meredith said, "Hey, I found this one other church. They meet in this high school. Let's just go check them out." And so we show up, and it turned out that the pastor wasn't preaching that Sunday. It was the executive pastor. One of the other pastors were preaching. So I asked where the pastor was, and they said he's on his honeymoon. And I was like, that's weird. Most pastors are like already married. You know what I mean? And so I asked how old he was, and he was the same age as me. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then having another conversation, I found out he was divorced, and this was his second marriage. I was like, oh, I can get down with a divorced pastor. You know what I mean? Like, I want a pastor that's lived some life. You know what I mean? Like, I want a pastor. I don't want one that like has not sinned yet.
Yeah, and it's perfect.
Everything's perfect, and
Right.
because there's a lack of lived experience.
Right.
And I don't like. I'm not saying like everyone should go out and like do something destructive or hard or like whatever. But what I am saying is like, if you're gonna lead people, you have to have enough lived experience to be empathetic.
Sure.
And so that was really attractive to me. I think it probably turned a lot of people off. But for me, I was like, yeah, I want to talk to this dude.
Yeah.
So we scheduled a coffee meeting with him, and
You and Meredith, or just
Mare,
you?
Yeah, me and my wife Mare, and we're sitting at Starbucks. He walks in, he grabs a seat, he introduces himself, and he goes, "Hey, my name's Bill. Just to get this out of the way, I just got back from my honeymoon. This is my second marriage. I've been divorced before. If that's an issue, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I can tell you it was completely my fault." And my priorities weren't in order, and that's why my first marriage ended. What questions do you have?
Wow.
And we were like, yo, I like this dude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Leading with what you think people might judge you on.
Yeah. And I just found him to be an incredibly open-minded, thoughtful, caring pastor, and just someone I could jam with.
Right.
We don't share all the same beliefs, and I think that's even better.
Yeah.
I don't share, my beliefs don't always line up with my church's. And I think that's better. And I think there's a lot of people that go, hey, I need to be aligned with my church. But then when everyone's perfectly aligned, I think you call that a cult.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's not healthy. And one of the things that I've encouraged people that consider themselves Christians to do is like, don't leave your church because you disagree. Like, they need you there. Like, they need someone that goes, hey, we should rethink the way that we believe about this thing, right? Like, somebody needs to beat the drum on things that they don't think are right.
Yeah.
And so that's, in large part, that's one of the reasons I've stayed in church.
Right.
Because I believe the church needs people that are willing to interrogate reality a bit.
Yeah.
To ask some questions. So that's the church we go to now. We've been there.
And what's it called?
A few years. Oasis.
Oasis, yeah.
In Holly Springs.
Yeah.
And just love the people, man.
Yeah.
Bunch of misfits.
That's
so
good.
You know, you look around and have some conversations, and there's a bunch of people who are recovering from various things, and you know, there's not this sense of like everyone's holy. Like, it's the sense that like everyone's working to become who they were meant to be.
Yeah.
And
I love
not
that.
Like we've got it together. You don't get the church speak so much.
Yeah, because it's almost like a front. Like, I grew up Irish Catholic in Jersey, and like, you know, everyone got really dressed up, and like they put on this like shiny image of who they wanted to be, but when they took all the clothes off, they were back to the person that, whether it sinned or didn't do the things in line with what they were talking about. They went to church as like, oh, this week I've sinned. I got to wash myself free of these sins so I can start all over again on Monday.
Yeah, yeah. And then curse at their family all the way home.
Right. Yeah, I broke out of that super early too, and just couldn't deal.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about the business you're in now, but let's talk a little bit about the family business that you're in. You're working, the family owned a furniture store.
Yep.
And so you worked in that for a little bit and didn't feel happy, or was working an incredible amount and just grinding way too much.
Yeah. Hated it.
Yeah.
Growing up, I admired my grandfather for it. My grandfather was a product of the Depression. He was born in 1930. He grew up hard. His parents were tenant farmers on a tobacco field in Roxborough, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And he decided that he was going to probably starve on the farm. So if he was going to starve, his words, not mine, he was going to starve with a different view.
Right.
And so he left the farm and went to Raleigh and took a job as this tire sales and service company, where his responsibility was repossessing tires from people that hadn't paid for them. Not like rims. Rims would be easy, right?
Yeah.
Like he would come and put your car on blocks and take your tires back.
Wow.
And after a few years of that, he realized that he was right about his fear. He was like actually starving. And what made it worse is he had added a wife and 2 daughters, one of them being my mother. And so he decided he needed to do something that would bring him some incremental income so he could buy food for his family.
Mm-hmm.
So like many people, even today, when you need some money and you need it fast, there's only 2 options. It's either do something illegal or have a yard sale, right?
Yeah.
Sell some stuff. And so he decided to have a yard sale. And his challenge was he was missing the 2 key elements that you need to have a yard sale, which is a yard and stuff to sell, right? He didn't have any of it. And so he got this bright idea, man. And this is one of the reasons I admired him so much, is he got in his car, he drove to the grocery store. He asked for if they had any leftover newspapers from yesterday, because today's paper they charge for. Yesterday's paper is free.
Garbage,
right?
yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So he takes yesterday's paper for free from the grocery store, takes it home, opens it to the classified section where all the yard sales are listed in the area for the weekend, and he calls every single person and he goes, "Hey, my name's Lawrence. I understand you're having a yard sale this weekend. If you like, on Sunday when your yard sale's over, I'm happy to come pick up and dispose of any junk that you can't sell if you'd like." And a lot of people said yes. And so that's how he got his first stuff to sell. So he started flipping other people's garbage that they couldn't sell. He did that for 5 years consecutively every weekend. At the end of 5 years, he had enough cash to buy a piece of property in Southeast Raleigh, build a 14,000 square foot warehouse, and stock it full of furniture. And that's how he got into the furniture business.
Wow. I've never heard that story.
He was brilliant.
That's crazy.
He was brilliant, and he was such a brilliant thinker and business person, and that's who I grew up really admiring. He went on to have 5 furniture stores. He ended up buying just tons of residential and commercial real estate, and he ended up dying an incredibly wealthy man. And so those were the footsteps I wanted to follow in. My mother was an exceptional salesperson in her own right. And I grew up, my parents had a furniture store, my grandparents had a furniture store, my aunt and uncle had a furniture store. So regardless of where I went, I was either going to, coming from, or talking about friggin' furniture store, right? So it was in my blood, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's all I knew. And when I was a junior in college, my grandfather called me and he said, "Hey, I want to make you an offer. If you want to get into the furniture business, I'll sell you one of the stores." And this was the flagship store in Raleigh. And I said, "Okay, cool. What do I have to do?" And he goes, "You need to find a way to come home a year early and graduate." And so he put some pressure on me, which meant I had to quit basketball. I had to give up my last year of eligibility. I had to figure out a way to hustle my face off to get enough credits to get a diploma,
right,
and get my butt home. And then I did an 18-month internship or apprenticeship with my grandfather, and then I bought the business from him.
Wow.
And ran the business, 4 years, got it out of debt, and woke up one day and realized, like, man, this sucks. I don't want to friggin' do this. I hate this. I'm good at it. I was really good at selling. I was really good at working with people. But I hated being in those 4 walls. And so I decided I wanted to get out of the business. And
you were married at the time?
I was married. We had been married for 4 years, because Meredith
Right.
and I got married like right after college, after we graduated. And she moved here with me, and we went after the furniture thing. And she got a really good job in the energy business.
Okay.
And so that was really helpful for us, because I was putting everything back into my business, and not bringing a lot home. I was just focused on building inventory, getting out of debt, and really infrastructure for the business. And then I realized, like, man, this is stupid. I don't want to do this. And I decided that I was going to run a going out of business sale. My grandfather had just passed away the year before. And so my sort of guiding, like, mentor was gone. And so I wanted to move on and do some other stuff.
Right.
And when you grow up in a family business that has always been a family business, we were going on our 39th year in business. Man. And so, like
4 stores or 5 stores?
5 stores. And then he sold me one, my aunt and uncle, he sold one. So he was like selling
But they were all
them
still in the family.
All still in the family except for one.
Right.
Which he sold to the guy who was managing the store for him. But the guy kept the name of the store, so it still felt like it was family store. Yeah. But my grandfather realized he could make more money by selling it to us and charging us rent than running it himself. He was brilliant.
Yeah.
We weren't as smart as him.
Yeah, I got a good idea. Graduate early.
Yeah.
Buy the business from me, and then I'm going to charge you rent.
And I'm just going to hang out and I'll come back by on the first of every month and pick up my check.
That's great. And, thanks, Grandpa.
Yeah, and I decided to run a going out of business sale, and I told my family. And when you grow up in a family business like that, I ate dinner most nights at my parents' furniture store. Like, we were there all the time.
Right.
Like, that's where I played. That's where I grew up. When my friends came over, their parents brought them to the furniture store, not to the house. Like, I grew up in the business. Yeah. And so at some point, you stop being able to make a distinction between the family and the business. It's all the same. So for me to go, hey, I'm running a GOB, they look at that and go, no, you can't do that to the family. And so I'm like, no, this is my company that I own. And yes, I want to go do something else. So the sentiment was kind of like, if you leave the business, you leave the family, sort of a thing. It's like the mob mentality, sort of. Yeah. And so that's what I did, man. I walked away.
That had to be an incredibly hard decision to make.
It was really tough. I left all of my stuff, my tools, my trucks, my inventory. I just walked away. And they took over the business, my family, my blood
So
family.
You did run the going out of business, but they then also...
Didn't run it.
Oh, you didn't do that.
Just walked away.
Yeah.
Just walked away.
So did you sell it to the family, or you just... Here?
Walked away.
Wow.
Because that was the ultimatum I was given. If you don't want it, walk away.
Wow.
And so...
And you spent some hard-earned cash and left college early to buy that business.
Everything was tied up in the business.
Didn't pull anything out because you were reinvesting it in to just make the business better.
Yep. So I walked away with nothing and had to start over, and took an entry-level sales job at Tempur-Pedic, the mattress company. Wow. And that same month, Meredith quit her job and had Kendall, our first child. So we lost 70% of our income, added a mouth to feed. Mare is no longer working. I'm the primary breadwinner, and I've got an entry-level sales job. Yeah. Not making enough money to pay the mortgage payment.
Yeah, that's not a lot of bread.
Beans and rice, rice and beans, man.
Right.
And I committed to Meredith that if she gave me 2 years, I would make us whole. And so I worked my face off, man. Like, it's all I did. It's all I thought about.
What is it that you did, though? Like, what was your idea then? Because for you to make a commitment to Meredith, give me 2 years, did you have a plan?
I did. So one thing I knew that no one could take away from me is I knew how to sell. Right. I knew how to communicate with buyers. And I knew that I could fundamentally outwork people and that no one would work harder than me. And so, when I was on a sales team at Tempur-Pedic, I just killed it. Like, I just put my head down and only thought about how to sell more mattresses to more dealers. Yeah. That's the only thing that was on my mind. And then when I wasn't doing that, I was learning stuff that would help me hone my craft, helping me become a better communicator, helping me understand more about sleep, about mattress, about foam technology, about how foam is manufactured, knowing everything I can know about the competitor. And and how to best merchandise a showroom floor. And so I became the primary like business consultant to my clients, because it wasn't just about me selling the mattress. I went in and said, hey, look, I can help your entire category get significantly better.
Right.
And I would make recommendations to competitors to get the what we call balance of share on the floor right, that made it easier for the salespeople to communicate value, so that they would sell more mattresses. And if they sold more mattresses as a whole, they'd sell more of my mattresses. And if I was the person that was doing the consulting, then they would probably add more of my mattresses to their lineup, which they did. And so that, every year I was in the running for some pretty significant promotions, moving up really fast, which was good because I needed every friggin' dollar we could get, because
Right.
we were eating salt and pepper sandwiches.
Yeah.
And then I decided I'd gotten to a point that I was traveling more than I wanted to, and then I got an opportunity to take a national sales trainer position, which would put me on a flight every Monday, and I'd fly home every Thursday. I've got a kid that's less than 1 year old, and I wanted to be home I want to tuck my kids in bed.
Right.
And I enjoy spending time with my wife, so I didn't want to be on a plane every friggin' week. And so I declined the offer, which was a pretty decent bump. And then it's sometimes when you decline an offer like that, what it really says to the organization is, oh, so Doug's happy where he's at. He doesn't want new opportunities for advancement, which wasn't the case. I just didn't want that one.
Right.
But that was such a big one. It was hard for people to understand, like,
They expected
this is
you to
what
take
he
it.
does well. Why wouldn't he want this?
Right.
And I just didn't. And so when I passed on that, I knew that it was time for me to move on from Tempur-Pedic as an organization. And so I started talking to some other people, doing some interviews. And one of my clients, one of my customers that I was selling Tempur-Pedic to, called me and said, hey, I've heard that you interviewed for this other position. And I said, how'd you hear about that? He goes, I just did. Let's have lunch before you make any decisions. So I went and had lunch with him. And it was the owner of what used to be Home Comfort on Glenwood Avenue. And he offered me a job to sort of GM his 4 locations. And that was my break that I really needed. And it added like 40% to my income. It got me really close to where I needed to be financially.
Right.
So I wasn't feeling like we were struggling anymore. And then, man, we were off to the races. That was a short deal. I was just there to like help him. We thought that we'd maybe work together for about a year. We worked together for like 9 months.
Okay.
And my job was to help him get his bedding category right and some other merchandising stuff right, and to help train his team and put a sales process in place, which we did.
Yeah.
And then I moved on from that, and it was really big for our family, especially after what we went through, which
Right.
was just crazy.
Man, that's insane. So many like speed bumps and hurdles and hoops to jump through.
Yeah.
And
by the way, this entire time I had no contact with my family.
Wow.
Because of the turmoil.
Completely shut out.
3 years. 3 years.
Did you try to reach out to them, or did you just take it as
It was ugly,
they don't want
man.
to? Yeah.
It was ugly, man. My mom was very much still mourning the loss of my grandfather. So she had her own stuff she was struggling with.
Right.
And I felt as if she was taking that pain out on me. And we just fell apart, man. Like, the whole family just fell apart, to the point that like my parents saw my daughter the day she was born in the hospital, but not again until she was 3.
Wow.
And they live 20 minutes from me. Like my parents passed my house to get to my grandma's house, so like we're close. And man, like families are complicated.
Yeah.
And it took us 3 years to recover from that. But finally we did, and we're in good standing now. There's obviously some boundaries that both of us have sort of set, and there's some things that we don't talk about on purpose. And the way that I see my family is my family are the people that live in my house.
Yeah.
Everyone else is extended. And
Right.
I love them. But they don't get to have a say in a lot of the decisions we make as a family, those are decisions that Meredith and I make.
Right.
And we include them when it's appropriate, and we don't when it's not. And it really helped. I think it helped me get out of some dysfunctional ways of being in the world.
Right.
That I'd inherited, not necessarily from them, maybe some. I think every parent gives their kids some garbage that they would rather have not given them.
Yeah.
But some of it was from family dynamics. Some of it was pathology. Some of it was my own ego. Some of it was just pain and trauma. But that break gave me an opportunity to like really wipe the slate clean, which is, and we were talking about before we recorded. Now I'm really comfortable with like just wiping things clean and reorganizing and realigning. Because once you've done that with your family business and your entire family, to like put a podcast to the side for a minute to like make sure you're doing the right things is like such an easy friggin' decision.
Right.
But for people who haven't been through those sorts of experiences, that can be a hard decision, whether it's right or wrong, right? But when you've had your heart ripped out by the people who gave you life, you know, it's other things pale in comparison.
Wow. Were you did you have a lot of hate for your family?
Yeah,
during those 3 years?
For sure. I mean, I really struggled with forgiveness.
Did they try to reach out and you just were so...
Some.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't the martyr here. Like I had things that were, I was at fault for stuff, you know, like I can for sure say that they did some really messed up stuff. But there was stuff I was angry to the point like my mom was like, cool, we don't have a relationship, but that's still my grandchild, and she would like send her presents, and then I wouldn't even unwrap them. I'd just take them to Salvation Army. Like, nah, man, you're not gonna have a relationship with the kid and have this thing going on with us. Like, it's just not how it's gonna be. And I was really concerned for you know my mom and her well-being. I mean, she really struggled with the passing of my grandfather and took it really hard. He was her kind of hero, and there was a real dependency on him. And so like I in no way would say I was the martyr of that situation.
Right.
We all had fault, and we all were immature in our own way. I think I would say they were more immature than me, and they'd probably say the same thing if you were interviewing them, right? Of
course, yeah.
Because that's how those family things kind of go.
Yeah.
But man, it took me those 3 years to forgive, and I think that's one thing people forget is that forgiveness isn't a decision. Forgiveness is a process.
Yes.
Like, you can make a decision to forgive, but then you've got to unpack and you've got to deal with it. And you can't just deal with a bullet wound in a day. No. You know, like you got to really work through it. You got to heal. You got to remove some of the shrapnel. You got to feel the pain of it.
Right. Because if you don't, it's like gangrene, and it scabs over. Then the scab rips open again.
Yeah. And then you end up you end up getting blood on people that weren't even in the thing.
Yeah.
You know, you end up taking out on your significant other, or your next relationship, or God forbid your children, or you know the dude that steps in front of you in line at Target. You know what I mean? Like, you end up. That it's always going to come out. So if you don't deal with it, and it took me that much time. It really took me 3 years to deal with the pain and the feeling of abandonment and ambush and all the other stuff that I felt I had suffered. And probably the same for them.
How was Meredith during this time?
Dude, she's a saint, man. I don't know. I could not have ever done. I could have never done what she did. I was very clear early with her that I didn't want her involved in this, and she stayed out of it.
Yeah.
And she just watched the pandemonium ensue, and she was in some of the meetings where I could not have bit my tongue the way she did.
Yeah.
And she just supported me through it.
Yeah, it's funny you say some of the meetings. It's not like a family dinner.
It's not a freaking family dinner.
It's a meeting.
Nah, man. Nah, it's a meeting. It's a And she was.
Did she support you in how you felt, or did she stay out of it?
She supported me in how I felt.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really when you're on just one side, because her allegiance is to me.
Sure.
Her allegiance
100.
is not to my parents.
Yeah.
It's not to my family. It's to me. And so when that's the case, like, it was hard for her, man.
Yeah.
And she's not a like meek sit back and let people like she's a tough girl. Like she does not like I've lived with her for 13 years and I can tell you unequivocally she does not get stepped on by anybody.
Yeah.
You know, and so to have the personality she has, which she really has the personality of a fighter. Like she doesn't take garbage from anybody.
This sweet Meredith, the
She
tiny
will,
girl, like
yeah, she will rip your eyes out, bro. And she, for me, and because she respected how I wanted to deal with the process, she just quietly supported, which is crazy. I could have, and I don't think if the shoe would have been on the other foot, I don't see how I could have been as kind and forgiving to if her family had done the same, if the same thing had happened for her family.
right.
I don't think, I mean, because she was the primary person and still is. Like she's still the person that goes, "Hey, have you talked to your mom lately? Like, hey, have you called your dad? You know, you should probably text your sister, you know?" And it like never like crosses my mind. Like I'm the quintessential like boy that leaves home, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And makes his own life and his own family. But for her, I mean, even through all of it, she still thinks about them, and a lot of times more than I do. So I really admire that.
That's beautiful.
I admire that about her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you lean on that significant other to let you know one if you're right, right? I think it's an identifying factor to say, yeah, hey, that was kind of messed up what the family did.
Yeah.
But it's also amazing to have a partner that's like, you might be wrong.
Yeah.
You might want to rethink this.
Yeah.
You might want to reach out. Like, they have a point.
Yeah.
And I think it's really good to have that person that not everybody can handle that type of information, and not everybody has that
No.
type of relationship with their significant other.
No, and I've struggled with that. Like because there's nothing I want more than to go home and for someone to tell me I'm the greatest of all time and every
Yeah.
decision I've made was awesome. You know what I mean? But she's also my greatest critic. Like she's the first one that'll go like, "Yo, this is stupid.
Yeah.
This isn't right. This is," and she has pushed back on me more than anybody else. But I would also say that I would never have created the life and the career and the balance that I have without her, you know, throwing rocks at my ideas. You know, because she really has balanced me. Because my personality is like ready, fire, aim. You know, and she's way more calculated and analytical. And I think a lot of times, I mean, from my experience, I've looked at that and gone, damn, I wish she would just like come along for the ride, man. Like, let's just see what happens.
Right.
And that's really easy to say because I've loved every idea I've ever had. And I'm sure you've loved every one of your ideas. They're like our children, right?
Yeah.
We love them.
Little baby. He's
Yeah.
just like, oh, I love you.
Yeah. But then I can look back like 2 years after the idea and I didn't do it and go, yo, that would have been devastating if I would have like followed that friggin' thing.
Yeah.
And she's kept me from making a lot of bad choices. And so now I'm becoming better. I'm not great yet, but I'm becoming better at recognizing that when she pushes back on an idea, it's like, oh, this is how she loves me, right? Because if she didn't, then she just like lets me go. Well, it's like a fire in a fire pit is awesome. It'll keep you warm, but you let it get out into the pine straw and the whole friggin' neighborhood is
the forest is gone.
Right?
Yeah.
And she has been the person that's kind of contained the blaze.
Yeah.
and kept me from making some dumb business choices or quick choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. And so now the family is somewhat kept at a arm's distance.
Yeah, I mean it's we're at a place now where we're healthy. I mean, we have a healthy relationship. We haven't had an argument in the family in a long time. Because I think there's a healthy mutual respect on both sides.
Yeah.
I don't get in their business and they don't get in mine in terms of how or why we make decisions. We just respect the decisions that are made, and Last weekend was a good example. I had Christmas. We did our Christmas dinner thing with my dad's side of the family, and I wasn't feeling well, and so I text my parents and I said, "Hey, look, I'm not feeling well. I'm not going to make it today. I'll see you guys at Christmas." And the response is like, "Okay, cool. Hope you feel better." There wasn't like bullshit. You know what I mean? Like
guilt
you're faking. You just don't want to come. Like
Yeah.
you know what I mean? We knew you wouldn't, that whole thing. It was none of that. It was just like, "Oh man, sorry you don't feel well."
Yeah.
And we don't question motives like we used to, which is a lot more healthy. But I also think that it takes a family falling apart to have that respect for each other. It rarely comes naturally.
Yeah.
It rarely comes without hardship or something tough that they go through.
Yeah. So let's get back in the business. So you worked for 9 months for the mattress company here in Raleigh. And then right after that is kind of when you started to explore Dale Carnegie, right?
It was a little before that. So when I was at Tempur-Pedic, I got a call from my biggest customer, which was Haverty's. The manager from Haverty's called me and goes, "Hey, like, man, I got a big problem." And my first thought was like, when your biggest customer calls you and has a big problem, like, I have a big problem now, right?
Yeah.
And what they told me was, it's like, "Hey, man, I got a big problem. My supervisor is requiring me to take this stupid leadership course, and I don't want to take it. And they want me to go with someone, but I don't want to take any of my employees. So if you'll come, we'll pay for it." And I was like, "What is it?" And she was like, "It's a Dale Carnegie something or another. I don't know." So I was like, "Cool." So I show up on a Monday night to the Hilton on Wake Forest Road, and I'm sitting there beside my customer, and I'm like, "Cool." I get 3 hours of free training, and the instructor stands up and he goes, "Hey, welcome to the Dale Carnegie program. For the next 8 weeks, you will be." And I was like, "Whoa, wait a minute, 8 weeks?" Like, I thought I was coming to like a 3 hour like leadership thing.
Yeah.
And now I'm tied in for 2 months. And so I ended up completing that program, and it fundamentally changed my life. It changed the way I saw the world, how I saw other people, how I saw myself. And that's really where it started. It first started with the way that I saw myself, which changed the way, which really changed the way that I showed up in the world, which changed the way the world saw me, which ended up changing my business and my life and my marriage and my parenting. And so as I was doing the super hustle with Tempur-Pedic, and then with Home Comfort, and then later with Bassett Furniture, and then with Valspar, and then with the other people that I've worked with, I was always kind of doing this like side hustle thing with Dale Carnegie. Because at the end of that first program, the instructor said, "If you're interested in being a graduate assistant, you can come back and assist the instructor, and it doesn't cost you anything." Cool. So I showed up that next Monday, and I was in a program 100% of the time for 6 years, just helping the instructor, because I was getting so much personally out of it. I never thought I could make a career out of it.
Right.
I never thought I could like be a coach.
You're just trying to better yourself.
I sold mattresses, man. Like, how am I going to relate to, someone in pharma or, ag, or like, the all of these other industries that I'm meeting people in. Like, I just sell mattresses, and I come from a little furniture store in Raleigh, And so after about 4 years of doing that, it was putting some strain on my home life, because once or twice a week I was gone at night, because I was going to do Dale Carnegie full free when we were struggling financially. And so I can remember Meredith telling me one time, she said, "If you're going to be gone from us, at least deliver pizza so you bring money home. Like, but don't just go and be just for free. This is crazy. We can't do this."
Yeah.
And so that's when I made the deal. Give me 2 years, and I've got a plan. This is helping me, and this will be the thing that helps me get to. And I was right. Those primary skills that I built early, and this was early in my Tempur-Pedic career, those things that I built helped me get promotions at Tempur-Pedic, which ended up helping me get the relationship and then the big promotion with Home Comfort, and then helped me be successful in the other places that I ended up working. And then after about 4 years of that, Tom, the regional manager here in the Raleigh area, gave
For
me
Dale Carnegie.
for Dale
Yeah,
Carnegie,
yeah.
gave me an opportunity to become an instructor. So I said, cool, I'll do that. That sounds awesome. So for 2 years, I worked to become an instructor. Finally, in 2015, I was certified as an instructor. And then in 2016, 2017, I went full time. Quit my real job, left my benefits and all the things, and decided I wanted to do this entrepreneurial coaching, instructing, selling, these programs.
Yeah.
And that's all I've been doing ever since.
So, not that many people know what the Dale Carnegie training is. So, unpack that a little bit to the listeners that might not know what it is that a Dale Carnegie training course is.
Yeah.
Most people should know who Dale Carnegie is, but
Yeah.
let's touch a little bit about him. And
Yeah. So Dale Carnegie was the founder of this organization. He, in the early 1900s, was really a genius in human relations. And so this organization has really followed the arc of what he did through the early teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, of bringing the human side to work. We've put so much emphasis on knowledge and on competency that it's easy in technology. It's easy to forget the human element.
Right.
And we forget that's the hardest part. Like the easiest part is to go get certified in something, or to develop a technical competency. But then to have to talk to the other person sitting across the room or the desk or the meeting and communicate an idea, or communicate how you relate this competency, this knowledge you have, to practical application. It's a completely different skill set. And so that's what I describe what I do for a living in different ways depending on who asks. For a lot of people, what I'll say is that I help technically competent people communicate with each other. Another thing that I commonly say is, look, I just get to go in rooms and watch miracles happen, because our primary work is helping people realize their true potential.
Right.
One of the things that my favorite Dale Carnegie quote is where he said, every person possesses innate greatness. And so the only thing that I do as a coach, as an instructor, and in all the programs that I run is only to do one thing. It's not to put things in people that they didn't have before, but it's simply to create an environment where I can draw things out that have always been there.
Yeah.
They just don't know it.
Yeah.
Right. And so
And help you find that thing that's already inside you that
Yeah.
you didn't know was there the entire time.
That's right. And to work myself out of a job. There's a lot of coaches, a lot of people in my space that work to make people subservient to them. They make themselves the guru. And my job is to make the participant, the client, the guru, so that they don't need to call me. They know how to develop the next skill. They know how to solve the next problem. They know how to manage their stress. They know how to build confidence. They know how to continue to build their ability to communicate, or their people skills, or their leadership, or their influence, or whatever that is, because they've been able to access that thing that was there all along.
Right.
And that's my work.
Yeah. And then so the Dale Carnegie course, how many courses are there?
There is a unlimited and infinite amount. We have 4 core programs though,
Right.
Which is Skills for Success, which is like the flagship. That's the 8-week program.
Right.
There's a high impact presentations program, which is a 2-day presentation communication intensive. There's a sales program. That's a 3-day program, and then there's a leadership program, which is delivered in a couple of different ways.
Yeah.
Those are the main ones, and then there's just a massive library of other curriculum that I often use to customize programs.
Yeah, I remember reading during a time in my career struggling with just human connection and managing, and I picked up How to Win Friends and Influence People, and that just like blew my mind.
Yeah.
Changed me a lot and really kind of started this path that I've been on of just self-development and working on my own toolbox and sharpening those tools.
Yeah.
But I guess that the great thing about it is, through this new friendship between you and I, you invited me to the
Yeah.
8-week program.
Yeah.
And I guess the easiest way to explain it is transformational. And I think we've this word has kind of come up, like that's the
Yeah.
only way that you guys are able to really explain what this 8-week course does.
Yeah.
And not only did you invite me on such a newly found friendship, I think we were sitting out on your boat and your daughter was jumping around, playing in the
Splashing around,
water,
yeah.
and we were just kind of shooting the shit, talking about what my goals were and what I was looking to do. And, you know, I was in the coaching, business consulting
Yeah.
sort of aspect, and you were like, I think you should come to this course. And, you know, it's kind of been like since I've moved to Raleigh, it's like people tell me to show up. I show up and the
Yeah.
magic happens
Yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah.
And you fully comped me to go, which was the most beautiful gesture that I don't even think I could ever repay you the amount of breakthroughs that I've been able to have just in those 8 weeks. But you really opened up my eyes to just this, again, like you said, this potential that's inside of me that was there this entire time. And sometimes it would come out and then I would kind of push it back down and like would get afraid of it.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think just this traumatic 2017, 2018, 2019 that has really kind of been this culmination of what I've been experiencing, going through, to have somebody such as yourself to really just peel back the layers of the onion and look at me and go, this person can benefit from this experience, and invite me, and then really kind of use you as a sounding board as I'm going through the experience, was freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And I can't thank you enough for bringing me on, and really kind of you showed up the first day and then weren't there ever. I thought you were going to be there every night, you know. And then, you know, I had this guy Josh, who was like the instructor, and I had no idea who he was, but he came up to me the first day and was like, "You're Patrick," and just the relationship that's really kind of evolved and blossomed from that, not only with yourself but with Josh. And there's still people that are in the course that I talk to, and that course really helped me find my voice, and really helped me find the peace and the clarity to be able to talk about what I was so hurtful and shameful about, and just so afraid to talk to, because I didn't want anybody to judge me, and I didn't want anybody to look at kind of my, you know, my coincidences and what had happened and say, yeah, you're that's who you are.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be your friend. I don't want to work with you.
Right.
And again, I don't know how to repay you, but just to continuously say thank you.
Yeah.
But it's really kind of changed my belief, and I think it really started. So, you know, Course in Miracles was a class that I've been attending. We've talked extensively about that.
Yeah.
The Dale Carnegie 8-week course. I've really kind of, and I give a lot of credit to not only you but also Sharif, of like really opening my eyes to this thing, this spirit, this being that I think can refer to now as God. And I'd slap me 2 years ago if I would have heard me say this. I was so anti, again, the other side of the pendulum, right? Like growing up, like it was being force fed down my throat of like Irish Catholic, like this is what you do. You know, repent, you talk about your sins, and then you start over on Monday. And now here I am. I was so anti. I believed in the universe. I believed in Mother Nature, and really kind of went on this spiritual journey, and now have just really understood that there's this thing that gets channeled through me in time, and this being that I just feel this ultimate love for. And I've really just come to terms with not being afraid to call that thing God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to talk to you about it and to talk to Sharif and to really kind of continue these conversations and expand on it has really opened up my eyes to just miracles that are happening on a daily basis.
Yeah.
What is it like for you to see that transformation in somebody? Because you're doing this like for a living every day.
Yeah.
And you're continuously having individuals that you work with just have these instrumental breakthroughs.
Yeah. It's incredible. And it can also be really heavy and hard, because I get the privilege to see the best of humanity, right? I get to see people that did not know that they had any more potential than what they've given themselves credit for. Did not know that they were accepted or loved or enough. Realize that they are all of those things. And there's no better feeling than to see the switch turn on. And it's almost like you can see it. You don't have to know. You see the way people walk differently. Their face looks different. It's almost like it drips off of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's times where people have potential and they never accept it, and that's really hard.
Yeah,
it really sucks. And the gift of this business is it has nothing to do with me. I just create environments, and people do their work and have their experience.
Yeah.
And people change their lives. It's like I like to say that we were all created by God, but we are all created of God as well, right? So in the creation, in the Genesis creation story, God forms the human and then breathes the breath of life into them. So are we flesh and blood? Yes, but we also are made not just by God, but we're made of God. And so that's why I can say with full confidence that every person possesses innate greatness. And I think one way to think about it is every once in a while something will flow through you, or you'll harness something, you'll access something. The way I think about it is that every once in a while you get to see that part of yourself that's made of God. And that's when you're in the most flow. That's when you have the most connection. That's when you're experiencing and demonstrating the most love, the most acceptance, the most empathy, the most connection is when that's happening. And so I get to go into sometimes stuffy corporate environments and show people that about themselves.
Right.
It's incredible. And then there's times I get to watch people push back and not accept it, and go through a program and have no breakthroughs and sit there with their arms crossed and not be willing to be vulnerable enough to access or to have the experience or to step outside of their comfort zone enough to go, hey, maybe there's more to me than what that person said that time.
Yeah.
Or that failure taught me about myself. And early in this business, it can make you feel quite, for lack of a better term, it can make you feel quite schizophrenic. Especially early when I went full time, about every 3 to 5 months, I would have a complete emotional breakdown.
Really?
Like complete on the floor in my bedroom, like face in the carpet, like emotional breakdown, because the joy is so deep when you see someone embrace who they are.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also so devastating to see someone not do it, because when everyone can, wow, not everyone does.
Yeah.
Right. And to see the reality of that, and then as I'm coaching, I'm hearing stories about these devastating losses people have had, these crazy experiences. Like I've coached people through so many things that I could never imagine experiencing myself. Like dads who are trying to figure out how to navigate their 16-year-old telling them that they're transgender, to like going through these crazy divorces, to people going, hey, I've never told anybody. I'm 30 and I've never told anyone I'm gay. You know what I mean? Like these really big life things that are so hard. And for so long, I held on to them. It was like they told me, and I just put them on my shoulder and put them on my shoulder and put them on my shoulder. And then I'd have this like emotional meltdown
where you'd have to let it all go
and try to let it all go. And then I'd feel great. for 2 or 3 months,
Right.
pile up. And so I have gotten better as a coach in and this is Brene Brown's language, not mine, but she talks about how sympathy is seeing someone in a hole, looking down and going, must suck to be in that hole, right? That's sympathy. Empathy is taking a ladder,
And down and
getting
helping them
down and
out.
sitting there with them, not pulling them, not dragging them, just putting your arm around there and being with them in the hole, but not forgetting where your ladder is and how to get out of the hole and knowing that's not your hole,
Right.
right? And so that's something I'm getting better at. Sometimes there's some things that are just deep or they hit close to home that are harder than other things. But the juice is worth the squeeze for sure.
Yeah.
But I like to say that when people say to me that they want to do what I do for a living, I say that's the first indication they have no idea what I do for a living.
Right.
Because it's heavy, man. And I was gifted with, I think, a unique type of sensitivity, where I am naturally a very sensitive person. And maybe this is because of my sales experience. I also have very tough skin. So I can take rejection, I can take hard stuff, but I can also feel it at the same time.
Right.
And I think that's a unique thing that my childhood gifted me with. And my parents maybe accidentally cultivated. I don't know that they knew that's what they were doing, but they did.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful for that, because I think without that, I don't think I could be as helpful as a coach or as stable
Right.
as emotionally for myself.
Yeah. So in Dale Carnegie, do you bring up God, or do you bring up your spiritual practice? Do you bring up the church a lot, or do you try to stay away from that?
What I like to say is I affirm truth no matter where I find it.
Mm.
And so if it's true, there's 1,000 ways to say it. And so I talk about God a lot. I might not always say God,
Right.
but my belief is like, I'm going to just affirm truth anywhere I find it. And so sometimes I talk about Gandhi. Sometimes I talk about, hey, you know what the Buddhists really do well?
Yeah.
You know what? And sometimes, and it's like, when you think about what Dale Carnegie did and How to Win Friends and Influence People, he lays out 30 principles. And this is what these 30 principles are the principles we teach in the 8-week program.
Mm-hmm.
If you take those principles and go, hey, this is a way to live. Another way to say those 30 practical principles is to go, treat others how you want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It's the golden rule.
Right.
That's the Bible. It's the golden rule. But what Dale Carnegie did, he took something that was true, because do unto others as you would have them do unto you is a truth.
Right.
This is a true and good and helpful way to live your life. And all he did is operationalized it. Here's how you do it.
Right.
Don't criticize, condemn, or complain.
Right.
Like talk about your own mistakes before criticizing other people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, be genuinely interested in other people. Smile.
Right.
Ask other people about themselves. Right. It's all just operationalize, or making those concepts practical. And so I don't find it necessary, and I think sometimes it can be a bit of a stumbling block for people to talk specifically about religion. Because I'm not here to get anyone to go, oh, I wasn't a Christian, now I am.
Right.
I'm getting people to go, hey, I never realized my innate greatness. I would rather them recognize the parts of them that are made of God and from God, than them going, hey, now I accept this doctrine. That's not what I'm here for.
Yeah.
I'm here to help people now. Like when Jesus talked about the kingdom of God, he talked about the kingdom of God of like something that's accessible now. He wasn't talking about the afterlife. He was talking about something we can access today here.
Right.
And so when you think about what is the kingdom, well, the kingdom must, at least in some way, be like the original creation, the Garden of Eden. Right?
Yeah.
And so what they called that when creation was in shalom. Well, shalom isn't just peace. A lot of people that's how a lot of people define it. It's peace.
Mm-hmm.
It's peace with complex with a lot of different complexities, having things that work together, right? And so the original definition of sin is the culpable disruption of shalom. So when I on purpose disrupt peace, where there's all different sorts of things that are working together. So when you think about the universe being in shalom, that means that we have gravitational pull here that creates this, and we have everything that goes around the sun here that does this.
Everything's working in unison, right?
It all works together. That's nature, right? And so we as humans have done a pretty good job disrupting shalom here on earth, just in our climate, just to be specific,
right?
But we also do that in our life, right? And so when I think about God's kingdom coming, creating shalom, the best work that I can do is to help people create shalom within themselves. And that's the only way it starts showing up in other places in their life, is if I don't help them see themselves differently and respond to themselves differently, think about themselves differently, talk to themselves differently, nothing in their life gets better. I mean, we can teach tactics, and tactics work, but only for a certain amount of time.
Right.
What I'm after is identity. I'm after how people see themselves, and if I can get them to see themselves not in some like positivity way, but if I can get them to see themselves of who they really are, in the most nuclear way, then that's what creates shalom in them, and then in their relationships, and then in their families, and then in the people their families touch. And so when I have someone sitting in my seat, I see 100,000 people.
Right.
Like, I'm not seeing like one dude or one lady. Like, I'm seeing these are thousands of people that can be impacted by one transformation that happens. And there's a lot of people, and I think speakers or coaches, they try to be humble and they go, if I can just impact one person. Well, I think that's a stupid goal, man. Like,
right.
I want, like, how about everybody? Like, I want every person that comes through my program to have a transformational experience.
Yeah.
And I don't accept anything less. And
right.
I'll hold people to the standard because I know it's there. And sometimes it hurts because it doesn't happen. But the juice is worth the squeeze.
Sure.
And it's worth the effort, because if I've got a group of 25 people sitting in a classroom that are going through an 8-week program with me, that's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of impacts that
right.
can happen as a result of one single person.
Sure. Yeah, it's the saying that how do you change the world? You start with you start with yourself.
Yeah.
And then your community or your family,
Yeah.
and then it just infects and spreads and continues on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's how you make change.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah. So what's next? What is on the, well, first let's talk about, you had a podcast. You had a podcast.
Yeah. I am not your podcast host.
Yeah. And it was I Am Not Your Pastor.
Yep.
I enjoyed it. It definitely opened up my eyes to just a different way of thinking, and that's why I really enjoy talking to you. Is you push me in territories that I'm not really kind of comfortable talking about, or that I don't really know or understand, and so I really like to hear what you have to say about God and the Bible, and all these crazy stories. I've been obsessed with Moses. We can talk about that in a little bit. Yeah. There's a backstory behind that too. So why did you shut down I Am Not Your Pastor?
So I shut down everything.
Yeah, okay. So, why did you shut down everything?
Yeah, so I had 3 podcasts out there. I had a podcast called Mastering Mentorship that came from my TEDx talk back in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
I had a podcast called Off the Top, which was a creation of these off-the-top conversations that me and a good friend of mine, Mark Kinsley, ran. And then I had I'm Not Your Pastor, which was a podcast that gave me an opportunity to talk about spiritual exploration with intellectual integrity.
Okay.
And so about 2 months ago, I went through a shift in my personal and business life, and this kind of happens every 3 to 5 years for me, where it's almost like I ratchet up a bit, either in business or in relationship or in awareness or something. And so I felt a strong pull and desire to get more aligned and to focus on two things going forward: alignment and impact. That's it. So I had to sit down and put everything on the table. Here's what I'm doing, and I started doing some performance planning and looked at how am I spending my day. First, how am I spending my month? Then how am I spending my week? Then how am I spending my day? And through looking at that, I looked at that and I graded out over the course of a couple of weeks, what am I doing that's having the most impact? What am I doing that I'm enjoying most? And what am I doing that's accomplishing both of those things at the same time? That's where I want to be.
Yeah.
I want to be in a place where I'm doing what I enjoy and what brings greatest impact. And for the people I've coached and for the people I've taken through my programs, those are the places that I've had the most impact on people. So that's where I want to be the most. A place that I've enjoyed is my keynote speaking. I've enjoyed my podcast, but I've never had anyone come up to me and say, my marriage is better. I've never had someone come up to me and say, my relationship with my children are better. Or somebody come up and say, you've changed my life because of that podcast episode.
Right.
Or because of that 20-minute, 40-minute keynote talk you did. What people say to me is, you changed my life in the program. You changed my life through the coaching. And so I wanted to do more of that. And I saw an opportunity in my business to do more of that, and just laser focused in. And so a couple of things that I stopped, I significantly altered the way that I eat, the way that I sleep, the things that I put in my body to sort of optimize my ability to impact and my ability to manage my energy. And so I stopped drinking. I stopped eating. I went on a completely anti-inflammatory diet, which is something that I've struggled with, is inflammation. And I focused on primarily where I could have the greatest impact. And the podcast didn't make the cut.
Wow.
And so that was a bit scary for me, because the podcast is also a way that I got exposure, and I gave people additional content or stuff for free. And they could sort of get to know me through that. So it was a bit of a risk.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, once I did that, and it's funny, when you align, it opens opportunities. And so I did that. I changed my diet. I started habit tracking every day in the things that are my essential things that I must do every day. And through that, the floodgates opened in my business, and I just went to kind of a different level. And at this point, I am looking at a 2020 where I'll have an opportunity to have more impact than I've ever had, because I was willing to say no to some good stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy and it happened that fast.
Really fast, within 30 or 45 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still not drinking.
Nope.
How'd you change your diet?
Primarily gluten and dairy.
Yeah.
Went away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
just like me.
Yeah. And just trying to be like you.
No, not even.
And I mean, to be fair, I didn't do the militant thing, because I can have a pretty extreme personality. It's like when I go for something, it's like all in, tunnel vision, that's it.
Right.
And so I was really deliberate with this. It's like, I'm going to primarily not eat anything that's going to inflame. So no gluten, no dairy. There's some other stuff. I'm going to primarily not drink alcohol. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to have a donut every once in a while, and I'm not going to have a glass of wine with my wife every once in a while. What it means is the vast majority, 95% of my life is going to be lived without the things that I've chose to live without, so that I can get the most out of myself. I can feel the best. I can have the greatest impact. I can stay in my purpose and in my passion more. And it's not for the sake, and alcohol is not bad. Alcohol is awesome. Like donuts are great, like all of those things. Milk is amazing. Cheese is like, the thing that I've missed most is pizza. Like, pizza is awesome.
Yeah.
But, eating half of pizza the night before, I've got a big day where I've got to be on it, and I wake up not feeling good, and I feel a little inflamed, and my joints are hurting because I consumed so much dairy the night before. Doesn't help me.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
But if it's Friday night and I don't have anything to do Saturday, I might eat half a pizza.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
You
And
might have a glass of wine.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And it's more a matter of deliberately planning than it is keeping anything for myself.
Yeah, I think it's all about balance. It's all about how to appropriately balance. Yes, you can completely cut alcohol from your life, but maybe that night when you're on a date with Meredith and you want to have a celebratory glass of wine or a cocktail, it's not, I'm going to have 7.
Right.
I'm going to have 2.
Right.
And I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to have a glass Monday through Saturday.
Right.
And drink every night and have a couple glasses of wine or a couple cocktails. It's balance. Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people have trouble with is they read about this keto diet, they read about this paleo thing, and they go full board.
100%.
And then they fall off the rails 45, 60, 90 days later, and then they're just re-delivering like all this poison back into their body. And it kind of defeats the purpose of what they're doing. It's like everything needs to be in balance. And that doesn't mean, now I have celiac disease, so I have to be uber careful about what I put into my body.
You'll
so
actually get sick.
Yeah, I'll actually get sick.
Yeah, I'll just feel like garbage.
Yeah. So I think it's having this balance and going, it's okay to be sober, but it's also okay to have a cocktail every once in a while if you have that control. And if you don't, then it's okay. And it's kind of like, when somebody is, uses substance abuse and then they completely quit cold turkey and then they go super hard into fitness and super hard into like a spiritual practice or meditation. And you're just filling that substance abuse void with this other thing that gets you high from working out or from whatever it is that you're doing. And so I think balance is very, very key now in this world that we live in because we're just being bombarded with things on a daily basis. So 2020 is going to be a big year for you.
That's the plan.
Yeah. That is from what you've told me about your schedule, it's pretty packed.
Yes, it's very.
I'm not going to see a whole lot of Doug in 2020.
Not a ton. No. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. I think we did it, man. You got anything else you wanna say? You wanna plug? You wanna get out there? I don't even know where to find you now that you've shut down all the things.
No plugs, man. No plugs. My social stuff is still up.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I won't be able to withhold some stuff. So I'm sure I'll do some little video or voice stuff. Just isn't as structured and not as it's not something that's pulling my attention the way that it has before. So I'll still be out there on Twitter and the Gram and Facebook and stuff like that.
Yeah, so it's Doug Stewart 919, right? Doug
right.
Stewart 919 on the Gram. You obviously can find your training DaleCarnegieTraining.com.
Yep.
DaleCarnegieTraining.com if you're interested in researching what those are or what that looks like. I highly recommend if you're in a part of a business or organization that involves leadership, that you're looking, let me even just strike that. I just think if you interact with a human on a day-to-day basis, course.
And you are a human.
And you are a human.
If you talk to yourself at all.
Yeah. I highly recommend attending this course because I think it's something that really can not only in an individual but a community but on a global scale can raise the consciousness of the human population. And I think it starts with just one, recognizing the innate greatness within each one of us, and then really kind of recognizing that innate greatness in everybody else and understanding how people show up is one, how they're looking at trying to be and not really holding who they might have been in the previous time with you. And I think that's kind of beautiful to really look at everyone. And, I love this quote is, the things you look at change when you change the way you look at things. Yes, and I think that really kind of helps people show up a little bit differently in the world. So Well, I appreciate you being here today, man. We've racked up some time, and I think we've talked about some really good stuff and some things that I can really sink my teeth into.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we're going to talk about Moses when we get offline now, because I want to talk about that. But I appreciate it, man. Thanks for joining us. And what I want you guys to do is, after you listen to this episode, I want you to go on iTunes, leave me a nice little comment, give me 5-star ratings if you enjoyed it, give me some feedback, let me know how you enjoyed the podcast, and I appreciate you guys tuning in to Just a Recording Podcast. Have a good one, guys. Peace.